Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome, everybody, to Nightlight. I'm Barb DeLong, your host, and I welcome you to, I think, what is going to be one of the most fascinating shows I've done in a long time. With a great deal of effort, I want you to know I bring you a show that I have been trying to get on the air for quite a while now. And what I love about this guest and the material we're talking about is that it's material that I hold near and dear to my heart, and the philosophy is one that I relate to tremendously. Let me kind of give you the entree into it, which is fascinating. Humanity has prayed for the end of suffering for generations, and yet it still exists today on this planet. There must be something that is not quite right. With all the saviors of all the world's religions having each come to earth and having each fulfilled their individual calling, why is it that there is still suffering on the planet? Is it that the saviors didn't teach us all the right messages? Is it that we, the followers, didn't actually learn the lessons? What's going on what will it take to actually end the suffering and bring us our salvation? If the saviors are here to save us, what then are the missing elements to actually being saved? There must be a way to our salvation. There must be a way for our prayers to be answered. If God is holding the answers, where is our role in the salvation of humanity? What do the saviors know that perhaps we've missed? What is our own personal role in fulfilling the Savior's teaching? Jensen has written an amazing book called Forgiven Sinner, God's Last Savior. And he takes a closer and compelling look at the role of the Savior and how we, the seekers, can fulfill our part. There's a path to salvation of humanity. There's a role for you to play out in this lifetime of yours. How can we come to terms with our sins and actually fulfill the dreams of our ancestors of bringing heaven back to earth? When we have really learned the teachings of the saviors, we will be saved. So what is your part in all of this? And this has been something that I have been working towards, trying to understand. It's been a conundrum I have been wrestling with, as most of you have been. And it's wonderful to find somebody else who has been doing the wrestling as well. I love people like Les because, he wasn't born to be anything like a prophet or anything like that, nor was I. And yet, the element of seeking and sharing what we found out has become a driving force in both of our lives, each in our own individual ways. So I welcome to the show Les Jensen. Les, thank you so much for struggling with me to get this show on the air.
It's my sheer pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, when I discovered your book, first of all, the title is what snagged me. And the more I read, the more I thought, my goodness, this man has the same textbook I do. And it's such a pleasure to meet somebody who is wrestling the same way I am. And I think one of the most fascinating things is people like you and kind of like me do not, as a child going to high school and everything, say, well, I'm going to be a teacher of spirituality at some point in time. I mean, that's just not the goal that I was aiming at, nor you, from what I could gather from the book.
Boy, not at all. I didn't have an inkling whatsoever of being an author or radio host or a spiritual anything for the first several decades of my life. It really kind of came through the back door. The cosmic 2x4, if you will, cracked me open.
Yes,
when I was about 35, I guess.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that 2x4.
Yes.
I have one that has so many dents in it, it's not funny. I think one of the things about life is that most people don't conceive of this as school, and I do. And so it's sort of like, you make it out of high school and college or whatever, and then, you're equipped to conquer the world, but you're not. And the journey to the joy and the happiness that we all seek, that gives us the vibrancy and the excitement of life that we're looking for, isn't outside of us, it's inside of us. And it takes a lot to figure it out.
Oh, indeed. The traditional education, be it religious, be it academic, be it societal or culturally, leaves us woefully inadequately prepared to actually do anything about our mythology. If you look at the history of humanity, kind of like this narrative that's been playing out for hundreds and thousands of years, there's nothing in it as an example of humanity coming out of the struggle. Saviors come and they go, but the narrative of humanity is entrenched in struggle. And here we are at 2019, and there's quite a bit of suffering on this planet. There's quite a bit of abuse.
Well, and it feels like more so than less.
Well, until the right information gets out there, and it needs to be clearly recognized that the only savior that's going to save humanity is humanity itself.
Yeah, and that's the purpose of it all. And I want to make it very clear that I believe, and I believe you do too, that there is an ultimate creator of all that is. We're not denying that there's not somebody out there that is the source of all creation. But it's rather it's rather uppity of us to think that humanity on the earth plane is the first and foremost in the mind of the creator. And the reality is, I kind of analogize it to planting seeds. You scatter seeds. You don't sit and watch each one grow. You don't really sit around and shelter it from the storms. It's sort of like you let the seeds go and they fell where they may, and they grow or not.
Well, sure. God with the big G, Goddess with the big G. They're there to help us in any way, shape, or form we so desire. And Jesus, let me be very clear, Jesus knows how to kick some royal ass as far as manifesting his divinity. As an ambassador of love, he is a phenomenal model of what's possible in our human demeanor. And he himself said, everything that I have done, you will do as well. So we should all be expecting ourselves to perform miracles, heal the sick, raise the dead, manifest out of thin air.
Well, yeah. And the fact is that these saviors, these teachers, these people that have achieved this enlightenment, were not meant to be prayed to. They were meant to be used as, you can ascend to this. This is, they graduated, you can too. And most of us have been programmed that that's not the case. So So that a lot of the stuff that we need to go through is to deprogram ourselves from the limitations that have been put upon us by ourselves.
Oh my gosh, yes, indeed. Some of my other books talk about the sovereignty and the dominion of your consciousness. I mean, the kingdom of heaven is within us. I mean, in other words, source consciousness is at the root of all of our consciousness. Our ego has no awareness of its own. It runs on the consciousness of source consciousness that's at the core of our being.
Well, it also only has a frame of reference from this lifetime. So the concept of there being more than it is not something that it can embrace.
Well, the ego doesn't have to figure it out. In fact, I don't think it has the capacity to understand the infinite potential of our human persona. And you know, if you look at the dynamics of it all, what's the most powerful consciousness of humanity? Now, we can look at that in several different contexts. There's archangels, and there's the big guy, you know, God with a capital G, Goddess with a capital G. There's droves of mystics and sages, light workers, beings of light, but those are all moot when it comes to changing the dynamic of the human experience. All the powerful consciousness, all the deities are moot because of our free will. And so the strongest, the most powerful substance on the planet for influencing our human future is humanity. You got to have flesh and bones. You have to have a body to be able to directly influence the human dynamic.
And
they set it up for us. I mean, the cards are loaded in our favor.
Oh, absolutely.
But we have to step into it and own it, and that is so contrary to how we've been taught. We're the citizen. We're the peasant. We're the masses. We're not the spark of divinity itself. We're not the powerful persona that can transform. Well, yes, we are. Actually, we are, but we haven't been taught that.
Yeah, and there's a phrase out there that I have not coined, but that I use often, and it's basically, we are those that we have been waiting for.
Sure.
And it's just a matter of claiming that part of ourself that you know, we're a spirit that is riding inside a human body. This is a human experience for our spirit. Our spirit's going to go on to other lifetimes in other places, and you know, far beyond what my imagination could ever gather. And it's been doing it for eons and eons and eons, so that, you know, people will tell you that you know, we only use 5 to 6% of our brains. Well, what do you think is in the rest of it? What do you think is stored in what they call the garbage DNA? I mean, we have access to all of that information if we just let ourselves have access to it.
Well, sure. To talk about the context of human consciousness, it's kind of like talking about electricity. You can't see electricity. You can't look at a battery and know if there's a charge on it or not. You can't look at an outlet in your house unless something's plugged into it and tell if there's electricity there. It's a very etherical substance. And human consciousness is very similar. But if we're all made from source consciousness, and I suggest that we are, I suggest that all of creation is a projection, a holographic projection of the one consciousness. If that's indeed the case, then the power of all the deities, the power of God and Goddess, is an aspect of our own. So I would ask this question: well, then how the hell did we incarnate into physical bodies, get so disconnected from this immense amount of power to the point where we're playing out the archetype of a slave or being homeless? or being wrought with disease. We had to take and I can't overemphasize how much, we had to take an immense amount of our power, of our consciousness, and put it offline. We had to disconnect from how extremely powerful we are. And so how did that happen? How did we get so disconnected from our inherently immense divine power? And I suggest to you that vehicle is karma, and more specifically, our subconscious. We loaded up our subconscious with suppressed emotions, with many lifetimes of belief systems that had us playing out the role of this mere mortal walking around on the gravity swamp, Mother Earth, such a beautiful place. But we could talk about this in length. We covered the entire scale of consciousness. So there's no power to be learned. So imagine a planet covered with ascended beings or Jesuses or extremely enlightened consciousness. There's nothing to heal. There's nothing disconnected from the truth. And so there's no opportunity to be powerful. If you go to a hero movie, the first 20 minutes, the first chunk of the movie is to portray how fierce and ferocious the villain is. And that's what makes the hero powerful, because nobody in the rank and file of the movie can see themselves as more powerful than the villain. So as souls incarnate on this planet, by choice, many moons ago, eons of time ago, our souls chose to create the deepest, thickest, stinkiest karmic swamp you could possibly imagine, and then turn around and incarnate into it. We're in a karmic tsunami. We're so disconnected from our truth. And if that's not the most powerful situation, because on this planet, we've gone to the very edge of darkness. We've built out a nuclear arsenal to vaporize all of life on this planet. We've gone to the very edge of darkness, and that differential of potential from source consciousness to the extreme darkness defines an extremely powerful opportunity for a human being to connect with source consciousness in a sea of billions of people that have no clue it even exists.
Well, what do you suppose, and we can only speculate, but what do you suppose the purpose was? Because the intent was there. We put ourselves here to learn what?
The many faces of potential, to know ourselves, to know what is possible in the human condition, to play out paradigms of consciousness, to see, to discover more aspects of ourselves. Consciousness is eternally expanding. Consciousness is eternally seeking new opportunities of expression. On this planet, at this time, I suggest you these years in the next few years, the next few decades, are probably the most substantial transformation of consciousness, I would suggest, in the whole flipping galaxy, because of how far we've gone into the darkness.
Well, now, so as we gather understanding, awareness, and whatever, we create greater facets, if you will, to ourselves, so that the light can shine out in other directions. And so every time we have another one of those aha moments, another facet is created so that we can see with a different perspective, a different understanding, the power that we carry within.
Sure.
So saying to somebody, and I've said it often to other people, excuse me, and I say it to myself all the time too, there has to be more. What is it? Where is it? How do I get to it? And when I tell people you need to work on yourself, you need to understand yourself in order to embrace what is inside of you and bring yourself to a better way of manifesting the magic that's there within your reality. So how do you do that? I mean, you had a moment where you understood the power of the karma that was carried within.
Sure. Well, the reason I'm breathing, my life purpose, is to language the power of unconditional love in a Western dialogue. And what my soul did to prepare me to do that was put me in front of very high power television transmitters. And I started my career in television way early in my life. And I studied frequency and energy and very importantly, power. And, as a young kid, I'm standing in front of this television transmitter that's putting out 1,000,000 watts of power. I mean, it had melt itself in a heartbeat if I didn't honor the nature of the power. And you press the go button on one of those suckers, and the glycol pumps kick on and the blowers kick on, and this invisible, etherical RF energy comes ramping up, and poof, millions of people get a pristine television signal in their house. And it took me years of scratching my noggin. I mean, I'd go to transmitter school and these PhDs would dump a bunch of ink on the board and explain to me how to build it, how to measure it, measure the power, how to balance it, how to set it up, how to tune it. And that's all very important, just like our own consciousness. But something was elusive to me from the classroom, and that was, what's the difference between 1,000,000 watts and 1,000,000th of a watt? And then, like I said, when I was 35, the cosmic 2x4 cracked me open, and the moment that happened, I'm in a shrink's office, and he's talking to me about anger, and I'm like, this is the most ridiculous conversation I've ever had. I don't get angry. Why are we talking about anger? And he kind of gets up in my face, and he puts his hand out, and he says, look, lass, come on, show me your anger. Push on my hand, show me your anger. I'm like, this is whatever. And I push on his hand, and I kind of sink in the overstuffed couch, and nothing happens. And he kind of gets in my face and goes, look, it's fine. It's safe. This is a safe place. In fact, I want to see your anger. You're safe here to show me your anger. Now, Les, can you show me your anger? And that moment changed my entire, that was the cosmic 2x4. Because in that moment, some mysterious valve in my psyche opened up, and just like turning on a transmitter, this immense amount of energy starts streaming out of my consciousness. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And I remember asking the anger as it's pouring out of my consciousness, I'm like, who are you? And the anger's like, I'm whatever you think I am. See ya. And it was so indifferent. The anger did not have any motive of its own. And that's really, really important when it comes to understanding karma. Karma is as impersonal as gravity. The mechanics of karma are timeless. There's nothing personal about karma. So when I released all that anger, the vibration of my soul, I went farther away from the slave mentality and much closer to the savior mentality, or the source consciousness, or the ascended master. In that moment, the needle, if you will, of my vibrational equivalent moved. And the reason it moved was a volume of energy involved in that moment. And it caught me off guard. The transmitter engineer in me said, what? Now, wait a minute, stop, time out. If this crap's been in my psyche for decades and I haven't been aware of it, what else is in there? And that's more than 20 years ago. And so I went on a quest with my own consciousness to go looking for it, to what the hell else is in here? And I found a whole lot of stuff. and by rooting out this compressed, this stored consciousness, what is karma? Karma is our own consciousness from the past pushed into our own psyche as an imprint. The anger I was releasing was my own consciousness, was my own anger that I never allowed myself to express.
And it does travel lifetime to lifetime if you don't diffuse it.
Sure.
So that you know, and everybody's trying to figure out what kind of karma, you know, is he talking about? So it's sort of like when you're abused and you don't do anything and you just kind of ball it up and hide it inside. When there are things that you should do that you didn't do, you kind of ball it up and hide it inside. And it can be major and it can be minor. It can be all sorts of different things. But the reality is it gets stored inside of you. And then unless you, it's like a garbage disposal, you know, unless you turn it on and crank it out, it just gets stopped up and you get stuck in place.
Well, what releases it is our own consciousness. What is karma? It's our consciousness. And how do we fix it? With our own consciousness. No hammers. There's no physical tools to go on. You can't sump pump it out or shop back it out. It's our own consciousness. And again, I think it serves us very well to put this in context. If we are divinity itself, how much have we suppressed of our own authentic truth? And to put a number to it, it's like talking about electricity before electricity was discovered. Once it was discovered, we assigned voltage and amperage so we could measure it and quantify it. But in the consciousness realm, we haven't come up with units of measurement for power. But if I were to use electrical or RF equivalents, I'd say we have trillions, not billions, trillions and trillions of watts of suppressed source consciousness within our own being. It has to be that way because ultimately we are the thing itself. Jesus said, "You're going to do everything I'm going to do." If we look at all the deities, we are one with that. And so at some point in our ascension back to source consciousness, we will pass every single rung on the ladder. Mm-hmm. So if a ascended deity could, they won't because of free will, but if they could come down and wave a wand and change the slums into palaces, that should be part of our equivalence. But in order to manifest that, you have to purify. In Forgive and Consider, I talk about two attributes. I talk about purity and authenticity. And if I deviate a gnat's ass beyond that, I'm going to bugger it up because I'm going to be projecting. I'm going to be projecting a portrayal of all that is. The burning bush said, "I am that I am." That's clean language. Purity and authenticity is the root of what I teach because I can't project anything on you without buggering it up. I have to keep my language clean.
Well, I think also what I try to explain to people is that everybody is unique. Sure. And it's different for everybody. And finding you do have your school that you've created, I believe, right? The Human Living?
newhumanliving.com.
And that does help to give people the tools that they need. I think first things first, you have to realize that there's more inside of you, and then once you've learned that, then it's how do I get there, and then it's like, if I pray to you, will you teach me? And then that's not the case. It's, you can give people tools. I mean, one of the biggest tools that I talk to people about is their intuition, their creativity and their intuition, which is a powerful tool to finding the magic within yourself.
Sure. And I would suggest the source of that is higher consciousness or your
Yeah.
oversoul or some equivalent to that, to get your ego out of the way and let the higher consciousness that is inherently you to show up. But you can work on it from a couple of different angles. So you're saying, okay, what the hell? I got all this karma in my psyche because I'm not walking around healing folks. What the hell? Okay, I got to work on my karma. I got to do this. I got to do that. Well, wait. Time out. On the planet now today, there's heaven and there is hell. Certainly hell exists on this planet. To be sent to hell as punishment, well, then we're already here. But heaven is a today now experience. Heaven can be experienced the entire time of the journey. It doesn't matter where you are on the karmic scale of consciousness. To understand and appreciate the dynamics of heaven makes the entire journey joyful. And that's what source consciousness offers, if we're willing to recognize it and embody it, that we can live in heaven for the entire journey itself.
And that's what I think that the prophets and people like Jesus and Buddha and so many others were trying to be examples of. This is where you can get to. It wasn't, I'm better than you. It's like, I'm just like you, and I got here. You can get there too.
Sure. So say we're in non-local space. We're in heaven. So there's no time, there's no space, there's no here, there's no there. And we take a gnat's ass step out of heaven. So now we're this glowing orb persona. We've taken a step into duality.
Mm-hmm.
But we have no experience. We have no desires. We have no karma. We can't speak of anything relationally because we have had no relationship. And then let's go outside and go to the nearest street corner and find some vet panhandling because they have PTSD. Who's the more powerful soul? Well, it's the vet. He's been through eons of time of karmic loading up, of karmic suffering. He can tell you about all kinds of aspects of human consciousness. The human beings walking around on this planet, we are very powerful souls. And to see ourselves as some kind of victim, or see ourselves as like, well, all the big ass beings look down on us and shake their head and go, whoa, brother, look at them. Not at all. They're looking at us going, damn, you guys are brave. What the hell? So I suggest that human beings on this planet at this time are playing out one of the most powerful paradigms, like I said, in probably the whole flipping galaxy. This is a very advanced classroom for very old souls to come to learn how to embody unconditional love in the darkest of the dark. How powerful is that?
Oh, it's amazing. And I think there are happily more and more people who are waking up to the fact that what you're saying is absolutely true. And now you have people who are saying, okay, don't do it for me, but give me the tools. What kind of tools can you share with them that helps them to do this work?
Well, I wrote books for all this.
Yes.
I wrote a book called Personal Power Fundamentals. It's an ebook on newhumanliving.com, and that talks about the mechanics of how do we take on karma, what karma is, how to resolve karma in our persona. I wrote Citizen King, the New Age of Power, to teach your ego how delightfully delicious it is to step aside and let your soul drive the flipping car.
Yeah.
And then teach your ego to understand the dominion that you have over yourself. As source consciousness, there is no consciousness that is to have dominion over you. You have dominion over yourself. And then the sovereignty of your life purpose. Many people are here to change huge dynamics, to change the structure of academics, to change the structure of economics, to change the structure of religious context. That's an extremely powerful paradigm. And I tell you what, if their ego cannot see themselves playing that out, it's not going to happen. So,
Yeah. The reality of what is possible here is amazing. And I step back every now and then, and I look, and it's like, there's so much, I call it magic. There's so much magic here. There's so much vibrancy. There's so much light on this planet that people are not seeing and using and embracing. That there's sadness in some way but at the same time, everybody is in charge of their own life. Nobody, you have to take responsibility. And if you don't take responsibility, then you're stuck.
Sure. Well, the joy can be experienced every step of the way. And so imagine a single mother with kids that's homeless, that's been living in flipping shelters, and she's gone through the school of hard knocks over and over and over again, and then through compassion and through the love of divinity, she gets a place of her own.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if it's a beat up apartment. She can walk through a door and close it and lock it and have a sense of safety. What kind of joy is going through her at such a simple step of survival? So when we decide to go this far into darkness, we have nothing but wave after wave in the escrow of our soul, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
The journey the ego experiences as it rediscovers the truth is loaded to the hilt of marvel and fascinating and wonderful rediscovery of the power of love, the power of unconditional love. And if that's not the most exciting storyline ever.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the spirit has to have a physical form in order to experience this and in order to go through this process.
Sure.
Because if pure spirit is not in need of being cleaned. So the choice of coming down, I mean, you had a beautiful analogy about how I believe you said that life was like a classroom, and that when somebody achieved this level of consciousness, they sort of graduated and everybody else put their pencils down and decided to worship that person instead of seeking it in themselves.
Sure, yes. I know the context you're speaking of.
It's a beautiful analogy in that suddenly it makes people like Jesus and Buddha and all of the other great, Enoch and Ezekiel. I mean, it's a huge list.
Sure.
But when you look at them, instead of going, oh my God, I can't walk the same path. I can't touch their clothes or whatever. It's like, instead it should be, I want to get me one of them. And
yeah, I think what you're talking about is, I use the reference of we're in a classroom and we're studying to learn our divinity, to master the power of our own consciousness. And Jesus, being the rock star that he is the first one done. He walks to the front of the room and the teacher gives him an A. We all put our pencils down and start worshiping him as some flippin' exception to the rule. We quit studying per se. We quit really doing the deep inner work, which is how you graduate. And we've formed a whole flipping religion around how many people on the planet are waiting for him to come back. Now, I want to be very, very clear. He is an extremely powerful persona, but he's not here to save us by wiping our karma away.
No.
It was never intended to be that way. If he comes back, our conundrum's not going to change until we ourselves change.
Yes. And I think what gets to me is, people kind of look at me like I'm anti-religion. I'm not. I think that there's good history there. I think there's good material there. I think that in many ways, a lot of the lessons there are really good, but it doesn't apply to everybody. I mean, there are many different religions out there, and all of them have very valuable and amazing things in them. the fundamental basis foundation of just about every religion out there is the golden rule. If you live by that, you've got it. But I think the thing that some people need religion, and if they need religion, then it's a good thing and they should have it. But religion is not needed to get to this level of consciousness.
Religion's just another classroom to understand our relationship with divinity. So there's a homeless person and they're struggling with the essence of living, the permission perhaps to exist on the planet. Well, that's a lesson in and of itself. Religion, now we're using a very vague term here. Religion could mean all kinds of things, but in a general sense, religion on this planet typically portrays a God outside of us, and that we worship this God outside of us, and maybe, just maybe, on Judgment Day, he'll be in a good mood and we won't spend eternity in damnation. That's exactly an identical classroom. Religion in and of itself is not good or bad. None of creation is neither good or bad. It's both the light and the shadow are the dance of love, which is what Rumi said. So religion's not a scoundrel or a bad person, a bad institution, any more than prostitution or war or any other form of disconnection from truth. It's there. Millions of us chose to engage religion as a vehicle to learn about our own divinity by separating ourselves. When I look at my family dynamics, in my family household, oh my God, God was huge. My dad had this religious, what do you call it, a streak in him. He made most priests and prophets and bishops look like scallywags because he'd tear up and oh my God, he made religion this thing where it had to overwhelm you over and over and over again. And so he would be overwhelmed. Now, he's a World War II vet. And so what the hell happens when you go to slaughter other human beings?
Oh, yeah.
He probably clinged to religion there as a survival tactic. I'm not here to judge why, but as kids, we were invisible as far as existence compared to this God persona. Because he'd talk about God and he'd tear up and wail and cry and preach and all that crap. And then he talks about his kids. And it's like, yeah, you got your homework done. I mean, we couldn't compare to this imaginary, etherical God. And so I was raised in a household where everything was an illusion. Everything was a non-truth. And I grew up the last of 7 kids, and I think that was a real gift, because after 6, the parents are like, good crud, what were we thinking? And so I had immense freedom. I remember my folks would say, does anybody see less? So if any of my siblings saw me, I could be out in the back stacking up all kinds of mischief. As long as they saw me, we're good. So I had no discipline per se, and I could think whatever I wanted to think. I could do whatever I wanted to do, and that freedom gave me the freedom of thinking to analyze everything that came before me, and I consider that's some of the value in my books is that free thinking, analytical observation of the mechanics of our culture up to this time.
Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, we have, for thousands of years, there has always been a mythology of some sort that we have followed, as opposed to looking within ourselves.
Sure.
And so we come to this point in time in our reality where people, I mean, is there a God? Of course there is. But what is our part in this whole amazing diorama that we have before us? And it's not to be controlled. It's a matter of taking control. And how does one switch their consciousness from feeling that there is someone over us to being the one that is not over other people, but that is in control of ourselves?
Well, that's a great question. Maybe another way to ask it is, how do we unravel ourselves back to the truth? How do we discharge all the imprinting, all the compression of consciousness in our psyche? How do we return to that purity? I like the saying, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." And to rephrase that, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see the mechanics of consciousness."
Ah, okay. So going from that statement, how does one become pure?
Practice. It took you eons of time. How many lifetimes, how many hundreds or thousands of lifetimes did it take you to accumulate? In Personal Power Fundamentals, I talk about karma and what we've pushed into our subconscious. And I can really see why it's been so elusive, in that if the listener just sits there right now and says, "Well, how do I feel? How do I feel?" I feel pretty, quote, normal, unquote. I feel This is how I felt yesterday. This is how I felt the day before. And so where is this? Just like that anger I released that day in the psychiatrist's office, I had no idea that I had this compression, this high pressure tank of anger in my psyche. And I had attracted to me angry bosses. The law of attraction had brought to me the appropriate teachers, angels, really. That angry boss was an angel, was a gift, was a very powerful soul contract for myself. So how do you unravel it? Well, I suggest to you, let's daydream a scenario up. So you go out and you strip down to your birthday suit and you roll in the mud, and then you put on clothes, a layer of clothes, and roll in the mud. So now you're pretty muddy. Mm-hmm. Well, go find the next size up of clothes and put another layer of clothes on and roll in the mud again. And then go put another size up, get the next bigger size and put that on and roll in the mud again. Do that about 45 or 50 or 100 times, and then lay down on your back and let all that mud dry in the sun. Well, you're going to weigh a couple of 100 pounds.
Easy.
You won't be able to even stand up. So you're laying there in the mud and you're looking up at the sky and you're going, wow, it's really effortless to just lay here. If I don't try anything, it feels pretty normal. But you've got all this mud, you've got all this karmic burden, this karmic imprinting loaded up in your psyche. Just because it feels normal doesn't mean there's a lot there. When I first started working with energy with my body, it felt like a 50-pound sack of potatoes. I had no notion of I couldn't discern my stomach. I mean, if I took my consciousness and went inside my abdomen, I couldn't discern one thing from another. It all just felt like density. I had no resolution to my consciousness. And that's kind of like laying in the mud. It's like, how many layers do I have? I don't know, a lot, and when it's in your subconscious, it can seem ethereal to work with. But there's a few things you can do. Karma exists as mental karma, emotional karma, and spiritual karma in a general sense. If we look at emotional karma, in my family dynamic, my World War II vet dad would cut us in half with anger. He didn't have to touch us. His eyes would just burn a hole right through you. If he got mad, you couldn't make yourself small enough. as a young child, when I saw fear on my mom's eyes because of the vibration in the room of anger, I quickly decided I don't want to be the source of that pain on my mother's face. I can't allow myself to show anger. And at a very young age, maybe even in the womb, I put in a mechanism that said, if that vibration comes up in me, I want to push it down because I don't want to be the imprint. I don't want to be the source of suffering of any of my family members. So this subconscious accumulation, a hopper, if you will. So the next day, my brother tears down the Marie Osmond poster in my bedroom. Now, that's a joke. I never had a Marie Osmond poster. But instead of getting mad, I wouldn't allow myself to get mad. I would get sad. I had an anger component, but it never came to the surface. And so the volume of anger from that episode was compressed and pushed into my subconscious. And that tank of anger was slowly getting charged as time went by. So my boss for a decade would belittle me. He was a very malicious person. And I'd go in to work and he'd sit there and fold me over myself. And I would shove it down because I couldn't get mad at him because my ego was scared to death of anger. My ego was petrified of the idea of what might happen if I allowed myself to get angry. And all this was happening without my conscious mind being aware of it.
Oh, yeah.
Mental karma, meditation. Oh my God, meditation. I suggest no thought meditation. All my Kool-Aid is oriented around you becoming pure. Purity. Now, how do I know about purity? How did I get 1,000,000 watts to go through that transmitter and not fry its ass? Purity. We had to tune the frequencies and the filters to very exact specifications. And when we did that gracefully, that immense amount of power could gracefully move through the transmitter out the antenna and everybody could see the picture. But if I detuned it, if I went and dishonored the rules, if you will, that power would destroy the transmitter.
Mm-hmm.
So to purify your persona is to return to your source consciousness, is to raise the power of who you are as an individual. Unconditional love has no bias or posture at all. So to embody it, you have to release your posture, your bias, your emotional stigmas, to purify your consciousness, to purify your personal energy persona.
That's a task.
It can be a joyful thing. It can be a habit.
Well, yeah, and it's a matter of, like I said earlier, deprogramming yourself and then reprogramming yourself with different paradigms.
I'm not sure you even need programming of any sort. The burning bush said, "I am that I am." There was no projection of anything there. It was just like everything is, the Bhagavad Gita says, as it is. Voila, there it is, voila. And so if you start to put context to it, you're going to bugger it up, even though you think the context is good. Well, this is righteous. Oh, this is desirable. Well, you buggered it up.
So it's letting go of judgment. It's letting go of everything.
Stark ass naked, yep.
Living the moment.
To see all that is as it is through the eyes of unconditional love. And then you can traverse time and space and not accumulate karma.
I would think that even Jesus, though, I mean, he had moments.
Have you been to planet Earth?
He had moments.
Sure.
Well, that's part of the human experience, I think. I know that I think you've used the law of attraction a number of times, and I find the law of attraction fabulous because
Indeed.
because it always brings to me what I need the most. And
Sure.
it's sort of like when conflict and issues appear, it's like, oh boy, here's another lesson,
Yes. Lesson. Beautiful.
and it's kind of like, okay, what am I going to learn from this? Because this is phenomenal. And there have been times in my life where I've been just so full of fear and sadness that it was impossible to look upon something as a lesson. I mean, there were times a long time ago where I can remember sitting and crying and saying, I know there's a lesson here, but this just sucks. Can't you just tell me what the lesson is? Do I come on.
Right. Yeah, you bet.
And it's a matter of, you cry the tears out and you sit up and you take a deep breath, and it's like, oh, okay, now how do I deal with this? How do I make this work so that I survive? And I have to admit that over the decades, when issues arrive, it now is like, okay, this is going to be interesting. Let's see where this takes us, instead of, oh my God, what's happening?
Right. Yeah.
But still, in all, it's in human form and all of that, and you still get caught every now and then. But it's always a lesson. There's always something magical and wonderful and pure in it. And I tell people, I can share my truth with you, but my truth is my truth for now. I'm going to evolve, hopefully, and grow, and my truth may change. So somebody said, what do your followers think of you? And I looked at this person and I said, I'm horrified to think anybody's following me, because I don't know where I'm going.
No savior, no mystic will give you your divinity. You're already it.
Yeah.
You're already enlightened. Everybody is already enlightened. It's a discovery. It's not a creation.
So it's taking layer after layer after layer of karma off and allowing us to be more light in spirit and to be able to manifest that light that is within our reality.
Sure.
It's easy to say.
Well, a lot of I think humanity can kind of get stuck in the observation of the dogma, where we're trying to become conscious, and we're watching our life, and we're watching what other people are doing, and we're trying to wrap some context around it. And that's all fine and good. But to make some traction, in other words, to actually meditate, to actually consciously scan your body to release unresolved emotions, to actually do the work.
Uh-huh.
When you do that, a couple of things happen. It's like when that anger first flashed in that moment through my body. Here comes this immense anger coming through my persona. My ego had 0.0 seconds experience with anger. And so that in that first moment, I had no information to put context around anger. But by going through the process of feeling it, I had an opportunity to feel it. And now I have information.
Uh-huh.
So when I go back to the well and connect with more anger in my psyche and release it, I'm giving myself an opportunity to become intuitive about anger. Now, I'll never have that opportunity if I don't actually do the practice and get some movement going.
Uh-huh.
So it's like reading a book about exercise to get fit. At some point, you got to put the flipping book down and actually go exercise.
Well, yeah, it's a matter of, you can have the knowledge, you can have the wisdom, you can have the intellect, but if you're not actually living it and manifesting it, it doesn't do you any good.
if you're not cleansing your psyche, you're not making any ground. If you don't change the energetic composition of your personal energy persona, chances are slim to none that the law of attraction is going to bring you anything different.
Yeah.
You gotta, what I really like about what I teach is how pure it is. I talk about energy. I talk about archetypes. No, I don't. I talk about energy. I talk about emotions. No, I don't. I talk about energy. I talk about mental stigma. No, I don't. I talk about energy. And to keep such an indifferent frame of reference to it all, because karma is really a very impersonal thing, very much like gravity.
Mm-hmm.
Karma is very impersonal. By keeping the language of my writing as an energetic perspective, it disconnects from the stigmas that we have. You know, how many wars have been fought over this symbol, this phrase, this word called God?
A lot.
I mean, there's so much stigma to the word God. If you want to accelerate your relationship, change the symbol. So you've been worshiping God. Well, give it a new name, source consciousness. Okay, source consciousness, tell me what to do. You've changed the symbol, so you've instantly dropped the stigma of the symbol of God.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't used the symbol source consciousness, perhaps, I'm assuming. And so now you have a new symbol that doesn't have a stigma associated with it.
Absolutely, yeah.
You see how you can kind of break some real deep patterns rather quickly if you just take one step to the left or one step to the right.
Yeah, a number of years ago, I stopped using the term God, and I said this is too limiting. So I went to source of creation, or universal consciousness, or whole bunches of other terms. But to me, God kept it in such a tight little ball that there was no way to, in many ways, there was no way to get into it or to have it come out and be a part of my life.
Well, I mean, in a past life, if you were to be praying to God to show you your truth, and you found some truth, and you were a healer, and they called you a witch and burned you at the stake, well, by worshiping God, you had your ass fried.
Yeah.
And so that's still in your psyche unless you've resolved it. And so when you use the word God in this lifetime, it doesn't matter what experience you have or have not had with the word God. In your psyche, there's a stigma with the word God.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the case with everybody, and or Yahweh, or whatever you want to call it. Like I said, we are held back by our past, and it's keeping us in the present and not helping us to move into a future that has greater truth, greater awareness, greater purity, greater everything. And that connection with the intuition, in many ways for me is that bridge from the one level of consciousness to the other level of consciousness. And it's through the intuition that we get little hints of what is there, the potential that is there, and ways to utilize to get there. And we get it in dream state, we get it in all sorts of different forms. And I would say that most people are getting messages, they just don't see it or feel it or hear it.
Sure. There's an ocean of personas that have immense love for us, our angels, archangels. There's so many deities that are in love with us, and they're with unconditional love to help us in any way, shape, or form that we allow, because it's a hands-off policy until we ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
To learn how to work with those personas is a very powerful thing. It's like the mechanism of prayer. Clearly billions of prayers have been said to end suffering on the planet, and it's quite rampant. So prayer in and of itself doesn't do diddly. It
No.
doesn't do jack. So, but I don't want to mislead, because prayer is a very, 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 very powerful mechanism, but it's the first step of a several step process.
Yeah.
When you pray, you get an energetic vibration as the answer. So you say, I pray to God, I want to have more loving relationships in my day-to-day experience. And so everything incongruent with love in your persona will come up to the surface. If you're holding bitterness, if you're holding anger or judgment, the things that are impeding you from being a better vessel of love will be shown to you. But if you're just praying and then sitting on your hands, go piss in the wind. I mean, nothing's going to happen, because prayer in and of itself is only a request for information, is a request for guidance. And whether we choose to respond to that is up to us. So prayer in and of itself has, it's not this intended to be the magic pill that solves anything, because clearly we've prayed millions and billions of times, and look at the quagmire we're in.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the tools, and we've talked of meditation, and it certainly is a great tool. And meditation, there are as many different ways of meditating as there are people on this planet, and maybe even
Sure.
more.
Yep.
So everybody needs to find what fits them, what gets them to the alpha theta, if you want. I mean, it gets them to that point where they can be receptive and connect to the spirit within. One of the other things that I tell people is to be creative, for the sheer joy of creation, whether it's gardening or writing or painting or drawing or taking motors apart and putting them back together. A way in which, again, you get to that meditative point, doing something of a creative nature, being one with creation, becoming a creator, that puts you in a place where you can listen to that aspect within you.
Sure, you bet. Well, to create, the action of creation is what grounds the inspiration into form.
Yes.
So you can think of it as the feminine and the masculine. So the feminine is all that is the infinite unknown. Everything in my unknowing mind is the feminine, which is profound and extreme. Everything I don't know is very profound and extreme. And by the very nature, the feminine is without form. Masculine is the form. So I have this image of Divine Mother and Divine Father laying in bed having a smoke after the best whoopee they've had in a long time. And they're like, damn, that was something else. What else is possible? And then Divine Mother has this glimmer in her eye, this dream, this vision of all that is, of all the galaxies in the sky, and smiles and hands it to the Divine Father, and he casts it into form. Mm-hmm. That's the process of all of creation. When you become powerful, your soul will, through your pineal gland, give you an inspiration of the moment. And when your persona is pure, there's no other energy contrary, as the image, the holographic energetic image, is shown to the quantum mirror, and the quantum mirror has no bias, and it instantly reflects that back to you. To have karma in your persona, if you're an old timer and remember the old film projectors, you put a film on and you put the film in the gate, you put it in the projector, and it casts the image up on the screen. Mm-hmm. Well, you can think of your karma as not only one film in the projector, but about 10,000 films in the projector, and you look at the screen and it looks like a bunch of muddled crap because all the images are overlaid upon each other. So when we load our subconscious up with unexpressed consciousness or karma, we have these standing waves of energy that we show the quantum field. So that anger that I had in my persona was part of every single moment of me expressing through the quantum field. So how can I create with any kind of accuracy if I have all this unresolved energy broadcasting simultaneously with my conscious desire of the moment? In other words, if I'm trying to project onto the screen a very clear image of what I want my life to be, but I've got all these other films loaded up from my past, I can't accurately define anything on the screen because my past is showing up in the present over and over and over again. But if I can clear out the film, the karmic imprinting from the past, and purify, blessed are the pure in heart, if I can purify my persona where there's no energy contrary, then the quantum field has no choice but to show it exactly what I give it.
So you have, in general, say you do have karma of some form, and you see it. Okay, so now I want to purify it. Is it a matter of just loving it, accepting it, letting it go? How does one purify karma when you have actually identified it? For instance, in relationships, sometimes a past relationship will sort of reflect onto a current relationship, and you'll have red flags from two different sources instead of just the one you should be dealing with. So that how do you then let go of or cleanse that previous relationship? Is it a matter of loving it, of letting go of it? How does one do that?
Sure, I like that. Great question. So let's keep it in the context that you brought it in, relationships.
Okay.
So I'm in a relationship with my spouse, my beloved, and each person brings their own karmic momentum, their own issues, if you will, with them. And then after the infatuation, the honeymoon period is over, and now the time's moving on. Maybe a few events come through the hopper, and some turmoil stirs up both personas. The emotional, the subconscious emotional imprinting gets stirred up, and in an unconscious relationship, that's where the blaming and the bickering and all that crap starts up. But if you're going to be conscious about it, think of the emotions that you feel as a personal thing. Think of the feelings that you're feeling as an inside job, because they are. When you feel emotions, as you come into an experience, you're projecting yourself with your beliefs, and then your emotions are a feedback mechanism to show you how you see yourself with the environment, in this case, a relationship. So say, for example, you have low self-esteem, and it's important for your partner to be nothing but a 24/7 cheerleader for you, because your self-worth is dragging its fanny, and you have this expectation of a loving spouse, and in your belief system, a relationship should be unconditional support. Well, that's not going to happen with anybody on the planet. Nobody plays a single archetype over and over for the end of time. We all have our own stuff. So as you come into conflict or upset or abrasion, if you will, own how you feel and disown, in a sense, how the other person feels. Now, that can take some effort because, like, I'll hear about young kids who are engaged, and they're like, well, they make me feel so happy. And I just stop and I pound my head on the wall. And I said, if they're responsible for your happiness, well, let me introduce you to your first train wreck.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is, when you pay attention to how you feel, pay attention to how you feel as you go through your day. So you walk into the kitchen and there's your spouse, and there's the bills on the counter, or the half-empty bottle of whiskey, or whatever the emotional trigger is. And you walk into the room and your energy shifts. There you go, that shift. Boom, right there, boom. Recognize the feeling shifting and look at it in an impersonal way, because it's not personal. So you have a ache in your gut, or you have a whatever the feeling that comes up that is triggered in that moment. Learn how to be comfortable feeling uncomfortable, because what'll happen is when that gets triggered and the uncomfortable feeling comes up, a lot of times the ego will say, I don't like to feel this way, and shove it back down. And I promise you, the next time it comes up, it'll have more energy to it, because when you shoved it down, you compressed the energy of the moment with the feeling of the past, and it just got bigger. But if when the trigger happens and the feeling comes up, and you just stay indifferent to it, and there's the feeling, and boy, I feel like crap. Oh, I don't like this feeling. Stay in the feeling and avoid the reaction to suppress it. And what you're doing in that moment is you're spending some time with the feeling so you can start to get intuitive. You're spending some time with the feeling so you can develop a new relationship with it. You're spending some time with the feeling so you can start to look at it in a rational way and say, why do I feel this way? That kind of experience over time will allow you to not avoid your feelings. The pathway to really powerful embodiment of your divinity is to own all of your feelings real time as they happen, because that's the only way you can traverse time and space without accumulating karma. Anything I suppress will come back later. That's the nature of karma.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's when people say to me, I'm in this cycle and I don't know how to break it. And, I'll say, well, what is the cycle? Well, I attract the same sort of person every time, and they're losers, and I deserve better. And, I hit my head against a wall. If you believe you're attracting losers, then yes, you will attract losers. So it's work on yourself here.
Well, when you stay in the feeling, you give the opportunity for the energy that was upset.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a gift, because the moment before it was unconscious or subconscious. And then whatever upsets anything in you is a hooray, a hurrah, a gift, because the subconscious becomes conscious when you get upset. So just be with the feeling of it, and in that moment, you're literally dissipating it out of your psyche.
That's what I wanted you to say. Okay, so being in it helps you to dissipate it.
And when you start to dissipate it, while you're dissipating it, you can look at it and you can get an idea of volume. For example, the anger that I had. So I had no clue that I had anger in my psyche, and then I dissipate a few, 500,000 million watts of it. And it startled me, but I learned pretty quickly that while you're discharging the emotion, while it's in motion, while you're releasing it, you can kind of look. It's like a window opens up, and as it's moving out of you, you can look into your subconscious and see how much is there. And then what happens is really cool, because the first time I released it, it was like, whoa, whoa. I was all reactive. The second time I released it, it's like, oh, here it is again. But the fourth or fifth time, it's like, okay, here it is. Let's ramp it up and let go of a lot. And I could discharge a lot more in a single episode because I was no longer scared of it. I had an intuitive understanding with it. I understood the mechanics of releasing it as a vehicle to move towards health and wholeness and balance. So I wanted to release it. So I had a whole different experience with the release process, and I could make much more traction in a single episode than that first time when I was very intimidated by it. And the decades before that, I was scared to death of anger, and I never knew it.
That's wild.
It is.
But, it's really, so many people have these situations, and they will immediately say to the other person, if there's another person involved, we need to talk.
Yeah.
And
you're making me feel this way. It's your fault. When I'm in your presence, I feel like crap. And you should be saying, when I'm in your presence, I feel like crap. Hooray! I feel like crap. I have found crap in my psyche. I have an opportunity to release crap, and I won't be as full of crap when I'm done.
Yeah.
Pardon the pun.
Oh, sure. No, but it's true. And it's so many people, when there is conflict and everything, it's again this, let's work it out together. This is our issue. No, it's personal on both people's sides, and it may have different aspects, concepts, things in their psyche that they need to work. It brought them to a point of explosion, but for different reasons.
Sure. Well, what if, we were just talking about, well, you make me feel like crap, therefore I'm going to leave you and go find somebody who doesn't make me feel like crap. Well, if you're full of crap, whoever you run into is going to make you feel like crap at one point or another.
Absolutely.
And so if you're living with somebody that pushes your buttons, don't leave. You might see him as a tyrant, scoundrel, bullheaded butt. Don't leave the situation, because it's an opportunity to heal yourself.
Oh yeah, and for growth. And that's, I like people who challenge me, because it means I grow.
Well, good.
And that's, I don't go for abuse, but it's, intellectually, I love it when I can talk with someone and learn more about myself. Where,
sure.
So the same thing would apply on that's just intellectual, but on the physical and on the spiritual level, same thing. It's, if somebody was just like me, it would be boring.
Sure.
So,
well, consciousness has an infinite realm of creation. So wherever you're sitting or standing right now, wherever you are right now in this moment, imagine, poof, Jesus appears next to you. Poof, there's Jesus. Okay, now Jesus is standing right next to you wherever you are. Doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter where you are. There's Jesus. And Jesus goes, here, hold my beer. Check this out. Poof, and he manifests a bucket of fish. And you're like, damn, that looks pretty, that's cool. Impressive. So the point I'm getting at is the field of miracles is right now, right here, right now. The potential to manifest miracles exists in all moments, in all spaces, in all dimensions, because all that is source consciousness. So when we look at cleansing our karma and healing ourselves, and on this planet, the spiritual journey can take a while to get our bearings with, but at the same time, we can daydream an understanding of what infinite potential means. In other words, if you're only working on your issues, and that's not a bad thing, and you're moving to a place of being healed, and that's not a bad thing. And then once you're healed, you start working on, it's like a teeter-totter. Once you're healed, then you start working on being a mystic or an alchemist or a sage or a savior. You can work on both at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
For you to daydream about the power of manifestation helps you heal your relationship with who you think you are. So yes, do your emotional cleansing work. Yes, do your mental work and your spiritual persona work. But at the same time, take your imagination out and shake it in the breeze and feed it nourishing creative input. Buy some paint and throw the paintbrush away and paint with your fingers. Go stomp in a mud puddle. In other words, approach your divinity from more than one intention, if you will, because we're very much multidimensional beings, and it's going to take a lot of stretching for our Western minds to really be able to embody the totality of what we can achieve as source consciousness incarnate.
Oh, yeah. And I would suggest that we have the element of miracles not only possible within us, but we experience them every day in elements like coincidences, because I don't believe there's such a thing as coincidences. I do believe that's spirit inside of us saying, see, you can make this happen. See?
Yeah, indeed.
And if people write it down and record it and keep track of it, in some way that reinforces it, and it happens more and more frequently. It's a simple procedure, and those people that have done it come back with their eyes wide open like, oh my goodness. They just keep getting more and more and more frequent. The more sensitive I am to my reality, the more sensitive to that I am to those things that I'm thinking and working on, and on a spiritual level, sort of working towards, that I get inspiration, that I get greater insight, that we have the proof that this happens within our reality. It's only a matter of taking it as a hint that there's so much more we can do if we reach further.
Sure. And without end. There is no end to it, ever, ever, ever.
Yeah, no, it is exciting. It is, and it's so exciting. I get so, I will not sleep tonight. But you get high on the prospect of the information, of it going out there and it touching people and other people understanding it and taking and working with it, however little or however much they do. That the words will find the place where they belong, and they will touch the ears and the consciousnesses that are out there. And if nothing else, if it makes them curious to try, that's a cool thing.
Sure. You bet. It's like flexing a muscle. The more you do it, the more the muscle is responsive. So we're creating, excuse me, we're creating all the time, 24/7. We've been creators in every moment of all of time, but to become conscious about it. And like I was saying, the law of attraction, all the unresolved energy in my subconscious is attracting to me experiences. That unresolved anger brought to me an angry boss. So I can be working with the law of manifestation, and I'm practicing the law of manifestation as I go through my day. And that's very cool. That's very cool. Bravo. But if I'm not also cleansing out my subconscious, I'm still attracting to me these elements of the vibrational equivalents of the karmic classes I've taken in the past, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And, people talk about their purpose each lifetime, and I keep saying your purpose is to grow and expand and to understand yourself more. And it's like, no, I have to get a job, I have to get a house, I have to retire, I have to pay children's education. And yes, all of that is important too. Survival is absolutely important. But there's more to life than that. The purpose of life on this planet was not to just survive for a certain number of years and then die and then come back again. There has to be a better reason for us being down here than just surviving.
Oh, no question. But the our potential, and I suggest I go back to that notion that we're living in the most advanced classroom perhaps in the galaxy. We're incarnate in this very heavy karmic tsunami, if you will. And if our sense of identity is in our ego and we take everything personally, well, then we can be upset quite a bit of time, quite a bit of our life we can spend reacting to the lessons, the teachers, our karmic energies attracting to us. But if we take a step back and we look at our life from the perspective of a soul, and we said, well, we're going to incarnate on this planet, and for the first few decades, for most of us, we're gonna move out of our hearts, we're going to move up into our minds, and we're going to run 80, 90 to 100% of our consciousness out of our egos. So if you look at a lot of the egos on the planet, 100% of their time is consumed by their phones, social media, worry, fret, anxiety, blah, blah, blah. And the inspiration of their heart and their soul really takes a back seat. And so if you look at a span of time, maybe a month, maybe 6 months, those type of people will get inspiration that actually lands in their consciousness just a few times. It's like throwing socks into a spinning ceiling fan. Nothing sticks. What's going to happen is, like, you want to kick your own butt, pray to God and say, Jeepers, show me how I can be an even bigger vehicle of compassion for humanity. And then your mind will be busy doing something else. You're unloading the groceries from the car. You're doing the dishes. And a single sentence will pop in your head. Go back to school. Mm-hmm. Start writing that screenplay. Why don't you write a book? And I tell you what, stop in the moment that you recognize that's a sentence that didn't come from your ego. Stop and write it down. Write it down on paper.
Yeah.
Because if you don't write it down, what'll happen is, so you're washing the dishes and like for myself, writing books. I'm washing the dishes as an example, and my heart says, why don't you write a book? And typically what we do is the very next sentence, we bring it up into our head and we bitch slap it with all this critical thinking. Who the hell am I to write a book? I don't know squat about grammar. I'm from a small town in Utah. Who wants to know what I got to say? And so our ego rationalizes the crap out of this inspiration from our heart. Well, newsflash, if it came from our heart, our ego is not qualified to validate it.
Yeah.
So when you get that sentence, when you write it down, now it has permanence. Mm-hmm. Sure, your ego will go and wrestle with it, but later on, you'll look at that paper and you'll go, oh, yeah, that's right. Write a book. And it reintroduces the inspiration of your heart and your soul over time. Go buy some Post-it notes and put some by the bed, some in the car, some in the kitchen, and start capturing those single sentences. And then over a few months' time, you're going to start to see a theme show up.
Oh, sure.
And that's your heart and your soul giving you inspiration about how to move into a more congruent path, how to bring your ego into a more congruent step with your heart and your soul. And if you want to live in synchronicity and joy, teach your ego the value, the power, the excitement, the adventure that'll happen if you actually allow your heart and your soul to guide you not once or twice every month, but 25 times a day. Your heart and your soul can guide you through your whole flipping life if you teach your ego the value of it.
Oh, absolutely. And those inspirational moments, I tell people to keep a gratitude journal, and it's okay to put inspiration, coincidences, and good recipes in it. It's kind of like, keep a journal. Keep track of the messages that are coming through you, because they have value, they have validity, and we do create our reality by our perception of it. So if you look upon these suggestions as, that came from me, it wasn't solicited, but it came to me, it's a message that there's something here I would explore, and if I did, it would make life better. And in my experience, it always has made life better. Challenging, yes, but better, absolutely.
A deep sense of joy, I would say, is a result. Now that I've written several books, I feel wonderful as an author. And when I first had the notion of being an author, I cringed. And now it brings me great joy to write books.
Oh, yeah. And it's amazing, if you follow through with this stuff, how there is a sense of joy. Every now and then, if I'm out with a group of friends to dinner, I will order dinner backwards. And, people just look at me and it's like, have you never done this? And you go dessert to the main course, to the salad, to the appetizer. And then if you're lucky, you have room for another dessert. And they for the most part, my friends will, are used enough to me being slightly weird that you do it, and you find that moment, that meal, is full of such laughter, such joy, it's life is fun.
It is.
And to not do spontaneous things, to not let spontaneity be there for you to give you a greater richness in your life, is a sad thing. And it's you don't plan it, you do it when it feels right, when you're inspired. And that inspiration comes from a special place inside of you. It isn't some part of you saying, how can I make her make a greater fool of herself than she's already doing? It's try this. It might be fun.
Well, sure. Well, in Forgiven Sinner, I point out that your life purpose is your piece of the big puzzle. Mm-hmm. In other words, if you fulfill your life purpose and I fulfill my life purpose, and on and on and on through humanity, we would turn over this karmic tsunami, and we'd have heaven on earth in a generation or two. In other words, your life purpose, if we go up in consciousness and look at everybody on the planet as souls, mm-hmm. We're an ocean of souls, and our souls are looking at the human dynamic and saying, okay, we've done this suffering and pain crap for a couple of eons. Now it's time to head back to light, back to truth, back to heaven. So the souls choose life purposes for everybody that if they were to be fulfilled, the human dynamic would turn over rather quickly. In other words, your life purpose is the best seat in the house for you to fulfill. When you honor and follow and fulfill your life purpose, you'll feel a joy, a sense of wonder, a sense of splendor in your ego as you walk in this karmic storm. How many people would love that? Most people are wringing their hands with fret and anxiety and fear. Your life purpose is the doorway to your own nirvana, to your own life nirvana for the entire journey of why you're here.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's important, too, for people to understand that you don't worry about the other guy. You know,
it's not your business.
Yeah. And so many, I've heard so many people tell me, well, I'm here to serve humanity, and so I have to teach them how to live and how to do this. And then it's like, well, if you're teaching by example and not words, okay. But if you're on a lecture circuit, possibly not. I'm not saying that you ignore the rest of humanity, but I am saying your purpose, your way of teaching, your way of spreading joy, love, and spirituality is by being it.
Embody it, yes.
Yeah, and with that manifestation, people can look at you and say, huh, things work for her. I wonder what she's doing. And then you can, give them your book. But it's an important thing. Our journey on this planet is for us to evolve and take responsibility for it. And we are in work, and we are works in progress, obviously. And are we going to walk on water this lifetime? I can walk on water. It does need to be frozen, but I can walk on it.
Right.
And can I levitate? Yes, if you scare me enough, I do levitate too. But the reality is there are so many things that we have ahead of us to learn, to grow into, to embrace, to experience, that it's such an amazing ride.
I promise you that souls from other souls that have not come to Earth will look in awe of the stories that you will tell of what it was like to incarnate on planet Earth. This is an extremely challenging, powerful place. I'm sure many souls said, "Oh no, not only no, but hell no, I'm not going down to Earth. Look at that place." And we chose to show up. It's certainly a challenging place to live. How many people check out, because it's so difficult? How many people terminate early because it's such a challenge? And it can be a very painful place to live.
Yes, it can. And, I've often wondered that human life, Homo sapiens here on the planet have been here for thousands and thousands, millions of years probably. And yet I get a feeling that there have been times in the evolution of our species that we have been closer to the oneness and to the source than we are right now.
Yeah, people channel higher consciousness that talk about the lineage of humanity on this planet. And there's the Atlantis era, there's the Vedic era. The Vedic era had an immense technology and an immense wisdom. I don't know what to call it. But what I'm saying is we've been evolved to levels of consciousness similar to where we are now. Mm-hmm. But the culture collapsed. Now, I'm kind of stepping out of my own realm, so I reserve the right to be wrong. And I reserve the right to be wrong with every sentence I say. But I've heard that we've tried twice to go deep into the karma and then make it out. And the previous two times we've tried, we failed and it collapsed. Mm-hmm. And I've heard that this time we've crossed the the barrier, and that the amount of love on the planet can sustain us. And for the first time in the course of humanity, love has overcome the darkness of karma. And right now, today, as we speak, these years, these are the days of the transformation of consciousness at a level that's unheard of, really.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a struggle to watch the news sometimes, but what
Yes.
we're doing here is a monumental accomplishment from a sea of old souls that came here to learn a very, very powerful lesson.
Yeah, I would agree. It, to me, I know that we are repeating a cycle, and it does feel as though we have stepped out of a circle. It's more of a spiral, and hopefully this time, we don't destroy ourselves. This
Right.
time, this time we make it across that threshold, so that over the next millennia or so, or however long it takes, that there is a greater sense of caring and loving and compassion on this earth than a play for power or control.
Exactly. So what you just said, to take that to heart. So your life path has you learning healing touch or Reiki. Your life path has you teaching a new fiscal or economic modality. Your life path has quantum mechanics in it. So you can kind of poke at it with the stick, and in other words, see yourself as a mere mortal. I'm kind of skewing words to get to the point. You can see yourself as a human being trying to figure this stuff out. Or you can take a step back and say, oh my God, these years of our human story are when it's very important for us all to show up.
Mm-hmm.
So don't just kind of poke at it with a stick. Immerse in it, stand up in it and say, this is what I found in this moment. I might find out new discoveries, but in this moment, this is really a powerful, passionate discovery of that I have. And when you put some power, some zing into what you're doing with intention, because you recognize humanity is here to help humanity overcome humanity,
Mm-hmm.
You can have a much greater effect through a much more focused intention.
Well, I think it's, there's a phrase that somebody used. I think it was a shrink at one point, turned and looked at the client and said, there's something wrong here if I care more about your getting better than you do.
Right.
And I think that my concept early on was, I had a spirit that had magic attached to it, and I was doing my best as a human in my human consciousness to get to that spirit. My philosophy now is, yes, the humanity in me is trying to make a connection to the spirit, but at the same time, that spirit is trying to make a connection to the humanity in me, so that it is a joint effort of building a bridge that both will cross and then integrate into one another.
Yeah, indeed. And so the effect is amplified.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's to me it's a wonderful adventure. And when people come, when I work with people and they talk about their suffering and stuff like that, or somebody came to me and said, I just lost my job, and I said, oh, that's so great. This gives you the opportunity to create yourself. This gives you the opportunity to move into other venues. This is a fabulous thing. You should celebrate. And they look at me like I'm crazy. But they wouldn't have lost their job if it wasn't important for them to grow. Sure.
So when you recognize your life purpose, own it. Even if sometimes it feels awkward, especially if your life purpose is a sharp left turn from the dynamics you've been living up to that moment. It can
Mm-hmm.
be kind of awkward to embody a language or a modality or something that your ego's not familiar with. But the more we show up with a passion, with an excitement, with a more focused intention about our piece of the puzzle, our life purpose, the more we put that zing to it, the more we accelerate out of the darkness, and the more we firm up the future that is more cohesive and harmonious and compassionate. I mean, we can take 1,000 lifetimes to get to heaven, or we can do it in 10.
Mm-hmm.
And what'll decide that is how we show up and what we intend to do with our power to create what our future will be.
Yeah, it is amazing. And you know, I tell people that every soul here is important for creation to be complete.
Sure.
So that there is nobody that is not essential for the totality of what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, you get people who are famous and who are constantly in the news or whatever, but I mean, the gal that checks my groceries is just as important as I am.
Indeed.
And you know, I think that random acts of kindness are a cool thing to do. They bring a smile to everybody's face, and there's light there. And the more you can spread light in very simple ways, it counts. It builds. It's cumulative. It's a snowball. And you don't have to be famous or have a lot of money to do this work. You have to have intent.
Indeed. Very, very well said.
So I just noticed my time here. I want to, we could go on forever. I want to thank you so very much for struggling through all of this with me and getting a show finally put together.
I want to thank you for having me. It's been such a delight to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Well, I do appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody that's listening. And I do have to sign off because I have to get other stuff put into this so I can get it up on the internet, you know, in a reasonable amount of time. Les, this has been a joy, and I so appreciate your going through computer trouble and ice storms with me, and I would love to have you back again. I'd love to, you know, grab a hold of some of your books, and I do want to talk about your school too. So we haven't covered everything I wanted to, but time is not with me today.